Hello, I am Tim Corey, and today I'm going to walk you through what the .NET Standard is and how it relates to other versions of the class library project type, especially. I've seen a lot of confusion on this topic since Visual Studio 2017 was released. In fact, I may have sent you here if you watched one of my other videos and had a problem following along. This can be a confusing topic, so I want to create a video to clear up that confusion. Let's start by looking at the various class library project types in Visual Studio. So here I have Visual Studio 2017 open. I'm running the Enterprise edition of Visual Studio, but the free version called the Community Edition will work just fine. So let's click on this Create New Project link and filter this list by class library. Okay, so here's all the class library types. Now, note that there are Visual Basic versions in here. We're going to ignore those. We're not doing a VB demo here. So there is for use SQL applications. Let's ignore that one. And WCF service library. That's something different. But the rest, we have .NET Core, .NET Standard, .NET Framework, and Portable. So what's the differences here? Well, we're going to concentrate on the .NET Standard today, but let's start with what the .NET Portable is, the class library portable version. The idea behind the portable version is that we could take this code and use it on any device. So if we're using a Silverlight on Windows Phone, or just a Windows Phone app in general, or if we're using it on Mono or somewhere else, the portable class library should work. The problem with the portable class library is that the team maintaining it was a separate team entirely from all the other .NET applications, the Silverlight and the Windows Phone and the desktop and the web. And so they were trying to pull together this API that would work across all of them based on what was already there, kind of shimming things in. So that's the old way of doing things. And by old, I mean a few years old is all. It's not very old, but it's old enough that Microsoft has said, you know what, this isn't the way we want to go. And so they've replaced the portable class library, and it's still here because of backward compatibility, but they've replaced it with the .NET Standard. So what the .NET Standard is it's a flipped on its head version of the portable class library. Instead of trying to find out where things kind of matched up in the different frameworks, what .NET Standard says is, based upon our standard, if you want to be a .NET something, if you want to be the .NET ecosphere, then you have to implement these APIs. Think of it kind of like an interface in C#. It's saying, here's the contract that you will follow if you're a .NET something, like a .NET framework or .NET Core. And so all of these different APIs, or all these different libraries, will implement the .NET Standard as long as they're compatible with it. And I'll show you a chart in a minute of what's compatible with what. But the .NET Standard says, here is the contract. And they have different versions of that contract, a 1.0, a 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, I think 1.6, and then 2.0 is coming out. So they have these essentially contracts, and they said, if you're the .NET framework, you will support this contract. And so really the .NET framework is what the portable class library aspired to be. The portable class library aspired to be this place where you call me and I'll work no matter where I'm actually located. The .NET Standard says, will definitely work because the frameworks implement us. They follow the contract. And so if your code can fit in .NET Standard, it will work across the board in .NET at whatever version you used at the .NET Standard. Now that's confusing, so let me pull up a chart here to show you what I mean. And I'll link to this in the comments. But here's the .NET Standards. So we have 1.0, 1.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 2. Now, down here is all different frameworks. So .NET Core supports things like Linux and Mac as well as Windows, whereas the .NET Framework is more for the desktop applications and even ASP.NET as well. So we can look here and say, well, if we want to use the .NET Framework 4.5, the highest .NET standard we can go to is 1.1. So if we're on 4.5 of the .NET Framework, then we have to use .NET Standard 1.0 or 1.1. Otherwise, it won't work. If we can move to 4.5.1, then we can move to 1.2. So there's a lot of different flexibility here on where you want to be. And so this chart kind of helps you figure out what you want to target. So if you want to target all these platforms, including Windows Phone Silverlight, you cannot go beyond .NET Standard 1.0. And there's not a whole lot of APIs in there. It's pretty limited. Now we'll look today at 1.6. And that supports .NET Core 1.0, which is pretty low, 4.6.1 of the .NET Framework, Mono 4.6, Xamarin iOS 10, Xamarin Android 7, and the next version, hopefully, of the Universal Windows Platform. So 1.6 covers quite a bit of the modern stuff. Now, if we want to go to the Universal Windows Platform as it is today, we have to drop down to the .NET Standard 1.4. So that's how you use this chart. They tell you use the lowest possible version you can get away with, but I tend to say, go for the highest version you can get away with. So if you don't have to support Universal Windows Platform, then go 1.6. If you really want to support Windows Phone 8.1, well, then go 1.2. Not 1.1 or 1.0, go 1.2. Now, this is getting pretty theoretical here, so I want to kind of talk you through what does the .NET Standard really mean. And there's two versioning rules that are really important and really powerful. So the first rule is the .NET Standard is additive. That means that if you have something that's using .NET Standard 1.1, it will have everything that 1.0 has. Plus, it will have all the stuff in 1.1. So it has both. So 2.0 has everything from 1.0 and everything from 1.1 and everything from 1.2 and so on. So it's additive. It does not take anything away, which is great because you can rely on it then to say, yes, we can move to the next version. If you're on 1.6 and you want to go to 2.0 and everything that you support, .NET Core, .NET Framework, whatever, if they all support it, you can move there without a problem. It's simply a matter of changing your target for .NET Standard, and it opens up those new possibilities of a 2.0 without taking anything away. That's wonderful. Second of all, it's immutable. That means that once it's shipped, once .NET Standard has been shipped, it doesn't change. It will always be that way. So it really does lock down the framework to be something known that you can work against. So it really is a powerful, powerful tool. So I'll give you this page. You can look over it. The .NET Standard is open source, which means you can go to the issue list and submit a bug or ask a question or even look at what things have already been asked for and maybe even make a modification and submit a pull request yourself. So it really is one of those ways that Microsoft has moved into the open source friendly marketplace, is they have open sourced the .NET Standard and said, this is for everyone to contribute to. So this is what .NET Standard is in theory. Now let's look at it in practice. So let's look at .NET Standard. Now again, .NET Core and .NET Framework, they can both make use of .NET Standard libraries. The .NET Standard library can go anywhere. But we're going to do a .NET Standard library just to kind of demo what it can do. However, if you're using just desktop stuff and you're not really looking to change, then there's not really a reason to go off the .NET framework. The .NET framework works great for console applications, WPF applications, WinForm applications, service applications, even the ASP.NET MVC, and all the rest. Those all work great with the .NET framework. That's the big Windows-centric framework. But if you have this idea that, maybe I want to put my stuff onto a Linux box, or maybe I want to target a phone platform, or maybe I want to do one of those .NET Core versions of the ASP.NET in order to target a Linux box and run an ASP site on Linux. Well, then the .NET Standard is probably the way to go here. So let's just create a .NET Standard demo. And I'll call it demo class and demo solution. Just so we have a difference here. Solution. Okay. We hit OK. And here is our .NET Standard version. Now it looks pretty much like a .NET Framework version. And the two are very similar in name, so it's kind of tough to figure out which do I have. One of the ways you can tell is under dependencies. You can see SDK here, and then it says .NET Standard Library. Another way is to right-click on the project and go to Properties. You can see .NET Standard, and this is 1.4. So we can change to 1.6, and that's all it would be, a change to 1.6. And we hit Save, and now this supports 1.6. If we want to back off to 1.0, we just select that and then apply it. So it'll say .NET Standard as a target framework. If it says that, you may not be able to follow along with some of my videos. Unless I explicitly say this is going to be a cross-platform library, it most likely targets the .NET framework. It's a much easier learning platform. Adding in different operating systems and the limitations of .NET Core and .NET Framework, of .NET Standard, just isn't worth it as a learning platform, usually. So unless I say so, I'm using .NET Framework. But in this case, we're using .NET Standard 1.6. So now I have my class 1. Typically I say to delete class 1 before you do anything else in a class library project. I will follow my own advice. And let's add a new class. We'll call it the person class. Make it public. And we'll say prop, tab twice, and say string, first name and last name. Okay, so it looks just like any other class. And really that is. Now note that I only have 3 using statements up here. Usually you have a whole lot more when you have a .NET Framework project. They have really cut back on what the using statements are by default. So let's show adding one more class. So let's call this let's call it the operator class. All right. Now this is not a working project. You can't really do anything with it. You can't run it because it's not something I'm actually going to necessarily use. Not yet, at least. But let's create a public void create list of people. And for right now, it returns nothing, so that's okay, but we'll modify that in the future. So list of person. All right, now we have our list of person. Let's actually change this to be output. We're we're going to say output.add new person. First name equals Tim. Last name equals Corey. And we'll just copy that maybe one more time. And we'll say Sandy Smith. And finally, let's go ahead and change this output to be a list of person, just so we have something coming out, and return output. Now, why I do all that? Well, I just kind of want to show you that this all seems to work just like a .NET Framework class library does. In fact, let's add a new project. We go to console application, get a .NET Framework console application, not the .NET Core. And we'll call this our console UI. And we'll add a reference to our, oops, on the wrong one here. Add a reference here to our .NET Standard demo class. So now here, let's set our startup project. So set a startup project. And now we can come here and say operator to control dot and say using the .NET standard class demo or standard demo class. That's quite the mouthful. Operator O equals new operator O dot create list of people, and we'll put that into a var my list. Now, I don't typically use var, but it's a shorthand for saying list of person, and so my list is just var. It's just easier. It does strongly type that to our list of person. And now I can do a for each var item in my list. And I can say console write line. And let's do our $ syntax, a $ double quotes. Inside here we'll say curly brace item dot first name space item dot last name, and then is on our list. So Tim Corey's on our list and Sandy Smith is on our list. And then last but not least, we'll do our console.readline to stop the console from exiting out. So we run this and there's build errors. So let's go ahead and say no, we don't want to run the last successful build. And instead, let's look at our error. And the error says a project, this one right here, targets the .NET Standard version 1.6. It cannot be referenced by a project that targets .NET Framework version 4.5.2. If we go back to our chart over here, 4.5.2, well, that's 1.2 or lower of a .NET Framework. So we have two choices here. We can either back down our .NET Standard to 1.2, or we can increase our .NET Framework version to, in this case, 4.6.1. So let's come back over here to our console. We can go to Properties. We can do a drop down, say 4.6.1. Are you sure you want to change it? Sure. Let's go ahead and change it. And now if we run this, there's still build errors. Let's see why. All right, so the error says that we have version 1.6 of the .NET Standard and version 4.6.1 of the .NET Framework. Now if we come back over to our page over here, 4.6.1 should work just fine at 1.6. But notice how it's scratched out here. You see vNext. Here's my guess. My guess is that I have an update for Visual Studio. Notice this update right here. One notification. That's an update for my .NET. Now my guess is that my version currently still thinks that it's 1.4 is the maximum .NET standard for 4.6.1. Let's verify that. Let's go down here to the .NET Standard Demo class. Go to Properties. We'll say 1.4. We'll save that, and now we'll hit Run again. And this time, the build succeeded and it ran. And it says Tim Corey's on your list, and so is Cindy Smith. Let's go ahead and edit those font sizes to be a little bit larger. How's that? Let's run that again. A little better there. So Tim Corey's on the list, and so is Sandy Smith. So it worked for .NET 1.4, but not version 1.6. And that's probably because over here I have a Visual Studio update. That's my guess. But this is one of those things I want to point out when it comes to working with these types of libraries. This is cutting edge stuff. This is stuff that Microsoft is just working on now. The fact that even their page that shows the different versions has scratch outs and modifications shows that. So what we need to know is that if you're going to target the .NET standard, be prepared for some buggy interactions. Okay? I've had a couple times now where things don't compile even though they should. And I'm like, I'm not quite sure why, what's happening, what's going on. I restart Visual Studio and it's fine. So this is definitely cutting edge stuff. This is definitely stuff that Microsoft is working on. They are working on it fast. It's a very rapid turnover, rotation of fixing bugs and adding new features. But at the same time, we've got to be careful not to get too close to that bleeding edge. It's really a fun place to be because you have all the latest and greatest tools and toys. But on the other side, you have all the bugs and all the kinks to work through on your own. And sometimes the IDE doesn't help you. Sometimes it actually hurts you. Like in the case of this where it says you can't do a 1.6, even though I know I can. So my guess is the IDE has just not been updated to say, yeah, you can. Or maybe the compiler isn't up to date. We'll see when we update that. So that's the first thing I'd be careful of, is if you don't need to do the .NET standard right now, just hold off. Now that doesn't mean don't play with it. Definitely play with it, try it out, build some test projects if you want to. I just wouldn't necessarily push this to production unless you need to. Now that being said, there are ways to build an existing .NET framework library that are kind of in line with the .NET standard libraries. Now the biggest thing to know is what's compatible and what's not. Now there is a plugin you can get for Visual Studio that will tell you if your current library is compatible or not. And I believe that's referenced in the page I'll link down below. But also, just you have to look at the NuGet packages you add, because if you add a NuGet package, it also has to be compatible with .NET Standard. So, and any third-party libraries as well. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're building a library. So my tournament tracker application, which I created for my C# course, that project, I just for fun ran that through the compatibility wizard to see, can I move my class library over to .NET Standard? And mostly the answer is yes. I have to do a little more research on a couple of NuGet packages I used. But the one thing that really tripped me up was accessing the web.config file, or the app.config file, I'm sorry. Accessing that file uses some libraries that are not available yet in .NET Standard. So in order to do that, I have to do it a different way. And so there's some code refactoring that has to go on there. So if I wanted to move that library over, I had to make a few modifications. And that's really what it comes down to, is in .NET Standard, if you're accessing something that's available only on the particular platform you're on, it's not going to work. So if I try and access the registry in .NET Standard, by default it's going to go, no, you can't do that because the iOS phone doesn't have a registry, not in the same way. Now, there are things you can do to get around that or to kind of add in some compatibility. And as the versions of .NET Standard go up, you'll get more and more access to more and more APIs that may add functionality that you need. Now, here's the deal. If you do want to go the route of building a .NET Standard library, you may have to create a second library. So here's what I mean. If you build a .NET Standard library, it may have the vast majority of your code, but there may be certain things that you have to do on the platform you're on. For example, if you have to access that registry, well, maybe you create a separate library that handles the registry access alone. It won't be compatible with the rest of the platforms like .NET Core or the Xamarin stuff, but that's only a little bit of code, and you can port that to other platforms, or at least port that functionality to those other platforms by rewriting it for each platform specific to whatever they have that's equivalent. So that little bit of code has to get rewritten, but the vast majority in your .NET Standard class library doesn't. So that's basically it. I just wanted to do a small little video. It's not a whole lot of demo here. It's more a matter of me kind of walking you through this, but just kind of showing you what .NET Standard is and how it relates to .NET Core and .NET Framework and even the .NET or the Portable. There's a lot you can do with .NET Standard already, especially if you can get into the 1.6 range, and 2.0 is going to have even more stuff. So if you want that cross-platform library that works anywhere in the .NET universe, whether it's .NET Core or Xamarin or .NET Framework or any of the other platforms you saw there, you can use the .NET Standard to give you that foundation on which you can build your applications. Now, if you're going to target only a specific platform, for example, if you're using WinForms, which only works on Windows, or WPF, which only works on Windows, if you're using these type of platforms, then my recommendation at this time is to still target the .NET Framework. It's more feature-rich, it's more stable, and it's really designed for what you want to do. But if you do want to go possibly down the road to a broader platform, then the .NET Standard is the way to go. And as you've seen here, it's really not that hard to use, and it kind of works the same way as a normal class library, so you can feel kind of comfortable doing it, but there are those little bit of hurdles you have to get over in order to get it going. The biggest one being the versions of the frameworks that you use together. So that's it. I just want to give you that quick kind of overview of what's going on with the .NET Standard. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any confusion, which I'm sure is probably some because this is a much broader topic than I covered. If you have any confusion or any questions, please let me know in the comments down below. I'll do my best to answer. This is, again, it's a new frontier even for me. So we're still kind of all learning this as we go. All right. Also, down below is a link for my mailing list and also my Facebook group. If you can give that a like, I appreciate that. And also, if you give this video a thumbs up, that'd be great. And if you aren't already, go ahead and jump on the subscriber list for this YouTube channel. That'd be great. All right. Thanks so much. Again, I am Tim Corey.